Is this working? Yeah, I think it's working. Uh, okay, I think we can. I think we can get started. There'll probably be a few more stragglers coming in, but let me wish you good afternoon and welcome you to the Atlantic Council. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dick Morningstar. I'm the founding director of the Global Energy Center here. And we're really pleased to host you all here today for a discussion with Zen Smati, who is the president and CEO of GDF Suez Energy North America, which is soon to become ENGIE North America. He can explain the name. But on behalf of the Atlantic Council, I'd like to thank Zen for joining us today to discuss the energy transition and lend his insights on the future of power markets and energy technology. We could not have imagined better timing for this event. We find ourselves at an historic moment in the world of energy. This week, all eyes are on Paris. And where representatives of more than 200 countries are meeting to finalize, hopefully finalize, an international climate agreement. So while the energy transition we're here to discuss was underway well before COP21, a successful agreement would undoubtedly accelerate the transition to a cleaner, more efficient energy future. To achieve this end, however, will require a sustained and well-funded effort from the public sector, but also from energy companies to develop new energy technologies, to decrease the cost of existing clean energy systems, and to address global energy poverty. Companies that generate and sell electricity will be at the forefront of the global energy transition. As the largest independent power producer in the world, ENGIE will play an important role in helping to determine what the global fuel mix of the next generation will look like. And given the rapid changes that have occurred over the last decade, including the shale revolution, the rise of renewables, gains in energy efficiency, it's evident that the global power sector is more dynamic than ever. And in the coming years, natural gas and LNG will play an increasingly important role. And emerging energy technologies like advanced battery storage and CCS could further transform the way that we produce and consume energy, and other technologies as well. In the face of these sweeping changes, leaders like Zen Smati must conceive of and execute a new vision to solidify the role of their companies in the energy order of tomorrow while remaining commercially competitive today. I am not sure that I would want to be in the position of being a CEO of an energy producing company today, trying to develop the complicated strategies that will be necessary for companies to survive and to determine who are going to be the winners over the next 20 years. But on the road forward, there are going to be great challenges and enormous opportunities for the power sector, and their decisions are going to have far-reaching consequences for all of our future. And so we have to work together to get this right. And we must work together to achieve our climate objectives while still promoting economic growth, increasing living standards, and empowering those who currently lack energy access. And so the need for this collaboration is the driving force behind our CEO series, which today's presentation is part of. Through which we're hosting Zen today. And I know, Zen, that I speak for all of us when I say that we look forward to hearing your insights on the major trends facing your company in the midst of this transition. One final housekeeping note, we encourage you all to join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag AC Energy. We will, after Zen's initial presentation, we'll have a discussion. I'll moderate the discussion with Zen and get your questions and comments from the floor. So without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Zen Smati. So we can clap for him. It's okay.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you to the Atlantic Council for inviting me today. What I'd like to do is really talk about 3 topics. And by the way, forgive me for using some slides. I thought it would be useful to have some slides here, just to put a couple of numbers in context, etc. And so that's really why I'm using slides, and I hope you'll find them useful. The topics I wanted to talk about is first to introduce you to our company, ENGIE, GDF Suez, etc. Although we are a very large company, very few people have heard of us, especially here in the United States, and especially people who are not maybe actively involved in the energy sector on a day-to-day basis. So I will use one slide at least to show you who we are and illustrate who we are. And then I chose the topic of energy, topic of technology and energy transition, because I think that's, you will see, it's really a hugely important topic for all of the energy actors today. Things are changing and changing fast, and I wanted to highlight that to you a little bit. And then finally, really highlight to you what we are doing in a response to these significant changes. You can call it a threat, you can call it an opportunity, but things are changing. And what is a group like ours doing to respond to that? So ENGIE is actually a new name. It will be fully operational, I guess, next year, which will be next month now. We used to be called, or we are called today, GDF Suez. And we've had many, many names over the past few years. We changed a lot. We were Tractebel, then we became Suez, then we became GDF Suez, then we became International Power GDF Suez, and then GDF Suez, and now ENGIE. So no wonder that people haven't heard of us. So that's maybe one of the reasons. The other reason is ENGIE. Why we came up with ENGIE? Well, because we paid a lot of money to some consultants to come up with a name, and they came up with ENGIE. ENGIE stands, I guess, for énergie in France. Some people in France might pronounce it Engie, I guess. Other people might pronounce it ENGIE. Candidly, it'll be a little bit of challenge here in the US for us next year, because there are companies like NRG, there is a company like Angie's List, etc. So we're going to have to spend quite a bit of money to make sure that people know who we are. But who are we? Well, we are a large company that you may never have heard of. If you look at our revenues, 75 billion euros, close to $100 billion, at least before, now maybe parity between the dollar and the euro, so it's about $80 billion. We have 150,000 employees who work for us. And we also are the largest power generating company in the world, and we are probably the second largest gas company in the world. So we really are very big, no matter how you look at us. Clearly, a lot of what we do is in Europe. We are a European company. 60% or more of our activities are in Europe. But we are big in North America. We're also big in Latin America, and we have quite a lot of activities in the Middle East, Africa. You know, we're active in Asia, but maybe not as big as you can see the numbers there. I will go relatively quickly through these slides because I want to leave enough time for questions, and so that we can have a dialogue as opposed to just one-way conversation here. If you look at North America, which is the region that I manage, you can see that we have a lot of activities here. We have an LNG business. We have 2 import terminals. We still import LNG to Massachusetts. We're building an export terminal in the Gulf, where we are hoping to export gas in a couple of years. We have a gas storage business, mostly in Texas. We have, can you still hear me here? Yes? Okay. We also have a pipeline business. We have 3 pipelines. We're building a pipeline that will link Texas to Mexico City, and that's $1.1 billion Los Ramones pipeline, which is in partnership with Pemex. So we have a solid relationship with Pemex. We have 6 gas distribution companies in Mexico, serving around 500 or 600,000 customers now. We have a large power generation business, 60 assets around North America. And we have a big retail business. It's the 3rd largest retail company in the United States. So we really have a big business, $10 billion invested in here. We have 2,500 employees. And the focus, as you can see, does this work? No. The focus is, I made a mistake here then. Sorry. The focus is Texas and the Northeast and quite a lot in Mexico as well. In this slide, I also wanted to highlight something to you, and that is the US and North America, because that's where we operate, and that's what I talk about when I talk to my colleagues in Europe in particular. North America is a unique region right now. It's one of the few regions in the world where we still have a lot of growth. The US is still growing at 2.8%, which is really the envy of the rest of the world, especially in Europe. There's really very little growth in Europe. Population growth is another one, growing at still around 1%, which is significant compared to many countries in Europe in particular. Big GDP, $20 trillion. Apologies, it says billion here. But it's trillion, clearly $1 trillion. If you look at electricity consumption as well, it's huge. The US is still the largest market in the world. It's still bigger than China. We have 1,000 gigawatt or 4,000 terawatt hours in the US alone. In the region, we have 4,500 terawatt hours. So it's really big. So no matter how you look at it, our region here is a big region. Lots of opportunities, lots of growth compared to the rest of the world, and this is important for the rest of my presentation. Now, what's really happening? What are the issues? Well, energy transition that people talk about is happening now. What does it really mean? It means that, for example, lots of people talk about rooftop solar. Is it happening? How much does it cost, etc.? Can you do it? Can I do it today? The answer is, it is happening in some states today. There is parity in terms of rooftop solar and price of electricity that you can buy from your utility. Today, if you live in California, if you live in Hawaii, if you live in New York, you are competitive. You can probably install rooftop solar, and it's cheaper than the price of electricity you buy from your utility. If you look at PV plus battery, what happens if I put rooftop solar and then have batteries together? Can I disconnect from the grid? The answer is, if you are in Hawaii, you can do that. But I put these slides together. We put this slide together a few months ago. And you can see it's kind of going right. After a few months, you could almost take that and move it a little bit to the left, because things are moving fast and things are happening really, really fast. So when I said Hawaii, New York 2025, it's probably not true anymore. It's more like 2020. Things are moving fast, costs are coming down, etc. If you look at electric vehicle penetration, it's also penetrating a lot. We all know about the Tesla. And the forecast over the next 20 years or so, there will be 10 million new vehicles, all electric vehicle in the United States. Gas-based distributed generation, is it in parity with retail? Yes. You could actually today buy small micro turbines, and you could be competitive in many states. Net metering, this is the concept whereby if I build solar rooftop on my roof, and I have excess electricity, can I sell it to the utility and get the retail price for it? The answer is yes, you can in many states, not everywhere, but in some states you can do that. Smart meters, which are really at the core of the new energy transition. Today, at least last year, there were 50 million installed. The forecast is within the next few years, almost every home will have a smart meter in it, which is really important for the future. So things are changing fast. But globally, what is going on? Globally, there are a number of issues and trends that are affecting our business. First one is global warming. I guess it's topical given the COP21 meeting in Paris right now. A lot of people thinking about issues. A lot of people, there is global consensus. I know some people still disagree with that global warming is real and there is a need for a solution towards that. So that's a big issue for all of the world. The other one is around economic growth. We know that economic growth has slowed down drastically. Europe is still negative. Even places like China has slowed down. You've seen Brazil, for example, that was growing at 5 or 6%. It's gone negative. It's really amazing. They slow down in growth. The latest forecast now is that in emerging markets, maybe we're moving more towards 5% long term, and more mature markets will be 2%. The other thing that's really unique now is the move towards small things, decentralized generation, decentralized everything, essentially. And that's having huge impact on energy companies and on countries. How do you think through that? What does it mean? Which technology would you go for? And that's a big issue. And finally, kind of digital technology, which is with everybody having a smartphone now, everybody's thinking, what can I do to connect my home to my smartphone and be able to control it? You've all have heard of these smart, like a thermostat, like the Nest thermostat people are using. They can reduce their electricity. All of that is making it, because of smartphones, it's making it so much easier now to interact with everything in your home, and that's having a huge impact on our industry as well. But if I bring you now back to the US and North America, and the biggest issue really in the US now, North America, and has been for a while now, is shale gas, and the impact that shale gas really had on everything that we do. The first one is, please remember that there really was no shale gas 15 years ago. It's amazing, really amazing. We take it for granted. Everybody talks about it. The US now is probably the biggest gas market in the world, maybe the second largest oil producer in the world. Could it become number one? It's quite remarkable what, I guess, the shale revolution had and hydraulic fracking had on oil and gas, and the impact on prices. If you look at production as well, I remember not long ago we used to say that the United States is going to be the biggest importer of gas, of LNG, and everybody was building all these regas facilities, and now everybody is building liquefaction facilities to export gas. But shale gas today provides 50% of our needs. Isn't it amazing? Remarkable. It didn't happen before, only a few years ago. Look at the flow of gas. People who work with gas, the flow of gas. Before, all of the gas used to go to the northeast because that's where it's consumed. Now gas is actually flowing down to the south. Well, there is also a lot of gas there. Why it's flowing to the south? Because people are building these liquefaction facilities, including us, to export gas to Europe and Asia, etc. I mean, people in the industry, if you talk to them, it's really quite remarkable. That change in flow going kind of northeast, now it's going south, is quite remarkable. Prices. Only in 2008, Henry Hub was $15. Now you'd be lucky to see Henry Hub at $4. You know, we really saw Henry Hub going down to $2. It is amazing. 2008 is not long ago in the world of energy and when we work with energy. It is quite remarkable. And the other thing is there's enough shale gas for the next, to meet the needs of the United States, North America, for the next 100 years, self-sufficient. It is quite remarkable. And all of this, the opportunities obviously for lower cost of energy, but more importantly, opportunities for investment. I mean, I live in Houston, Texas. You can tell from my accent that I'm true Texan. But look, I've been there for 20 years though. And I can tell you the changes I've seen in Houston and Texas is quite remarkable. The investment that's coming into Texas is just amazing. So related to shale gas and energy intensive industry is actually coming. Is not coming, is already there, and more is coming, both to Texas, but also we operate in Mexico, and I manage Mexico as well, and the investment that's happening in Mexico is also remarkable there too. The second one is all about distributed generation, distributed technology, and what are we doing, etc. And here, look at innovation. This slide is actually quite interesting. Going back 200 years, if you look at the impact of technology, whether it's a steam engine, etc., when we had these waves of innovation, this innovation used to have an impact, which wasn't huge, but they used to last a long time, 100 years before you have a next set of innovation. But look what's going on now. We have a new innovation almost every 10 years. So the innovation that we have today tend to be shorter in duration, but peakier, the impact is bigger. It's quite remarkable. And this is not just in energy, it's innovation in general, but the impact on energy is remarkable. Look at the solar PV, the cost of solar. 2010, 5 years ago, if you were to install solar panels, the cost was like $5 per watt. And the forecast was, well, we might get, after 10 years, to $2, which is amazing, really. 10 years, you go down from $4.50 to less than $2. But actually, you know, this is now obsolete. We are at $2 today. So in 5 years, we managed to go from $4.50 to $2. It is amazing. That's why everybody is talking about it. The other thing I wanted to, an example, recently the city of Austin wanted to build a 20 megawatt solar power plant, which is relatively big by solar standards. And they had people bidding to build this power plant. They had 100 people competing for this. And the cost that they had was less than $40 per megawatt hours. $40 per megawatt hours is very low. Just to put it in context for you, today you can build the best gas turbine using a gas price of $5. The cost of gas alone will be almost $40. So you have a cost of gas alone is $40 per megawatt hours if you use $5 per MMBTU, versus building and installing solar power plant for $40. So the cost of gas alone, if you were to build a gas-fired power plant, you have to invest $1 billion. It is really amazing, amazing, this cost reduction. I want to highlight that. The other thing is in the battery storage technology as well. Also, the costs are coming down from 1,000 to 540 in 3 years. I went to visit Silicon Valley because I really wanted to learn a little bit what's going on there. So I went to visit a number of companies there, and I came away really impressed and amazed by the smaller companies that are investing in technology related to the energy sector. That's why I went there. And you see innovation happening there in an amazing way, all around the energy sector. That's really what happened. I also went to visit Tesla, and I was really amazed about how they were building these new battery packs that they're selling for $3,000 that you can use and put it in your garage to store your energy from your solar panels. And that's today. You can do it today. And digital transformation, you're all aware of a global computing cost, how they came down from $500 in 1990 to almost nothing now. That's why the cost of smartphones is down, etc., etc. The same thing is happening to everything else, which is remarkable. But one thing perhaps people forget about it, because sometimes we think about technology and we think, wow, you know, look at solar PV, etc. Let me remind you of one technology that we all take for granted today, but is having a huge impact, and that is the light bulb, the LED light bulb. A few years ago, I went to buy some. I wanted to change the light bulbs in my home. I went to buy them. I went to Home Depot. The cost was over $25 only 2 years ago. In fact, a few years before that, it was over $50 to buy a light bulb, LED light bulb. So, you know, if it's $50, would you replace it really to a bulb that normally costs 50 cents or $1? Probably not. I'm not going to spend $50 to replace something that costs $1. Today, if you go to Home Depot, you can buy the same light bulb for less than $2. That is a big impact. So just look at the savings you get from that. Lighting itself, if you were to replace all of the light bulbs in your home, you reduce your consumption from the light bulbs, I guess, by 90%. That's going to have a huge impact. Just from lighting. So just imagine what could happen is if everybody goes towards that. And then if you use AC systems, etc., if you look at the efficiency of the new HVAC systems is really improving in a massive way. So you combine the new, more efficient HVAC systems with LED, and all of a sudden, the cost of electricity in your home will come down massively without doing anything new, without going and installing solar PV, etc. That's the next wave. I'm saying that you can do it very inexpensively to start with, and you can reduce your electricity demand. That's going to have a huge impact on us, the energy sector, the electricity sector, which is going to have a big impact on the gas sector as well. So this is really, really important. And we're beginning to see that. You can see the change in, this is the change in kilowatt hours per household. Because of lighting, it's a massive reduction. You can move also to water heating. You can do lots of things now because all the new equipment is much more efficient than before. And that's really important. The final thing, I guess, is the digitization and the consumer engagement. And what I'm trying to say here is that before, people weren't really interested in energy. They weren't interested in electricity. None of us were. As long as I turn the light on, the switch on, and electricity light is on. That's it. Why do I need to think about it much more than that? Nobody really thought about it more than that. 30 years ago, I started my career in the electricity industry in the UK. And I worked for the utility there, huge utility. It used to be the largest utility in the world, actually. It was in the UK. And we had a vision that we all understood. These we talk about vision, mission, etc. There was a vision, the best vision I've ever seen. Keep the lights on at any cost. That's it. That was the vision. That was the mission. It worked well. No matter what you did, whether you were an engineer or doing something else, you understood it. And people applied it, which is keep the lights on. So what do? You overinvest. We had nuclear power plants, the best nuclear. Some power plants have actually never worked. In fact, there's one power plant, I worked on it for a while. There's a Dungeness, it's called Dungeness Power Plant in the UK. After 20 years, it still didn't generate electricity. It's a gas-cooled reactor kind of technology. So things have changed a lot. But then things were clear because, you know what? Really, the consumer, the customer never really bothered us. In fact, even though everybody was our customer, we really never interacted with the customer. You know, you get your electricity, you get your bill, you pay it, and that's the end of it. But now, the world is different. Everybody now has a smartphone. They want to interact. They want to talk. They don't trust big companies. They trust their friends, etc. You have more competition. So the world is different. And so as a company, you have to respond to that, because if you are not responsive to that, if your costs are not low, if you don't provide something different, then you know what? They're going to leave you to go to your competitor. We have a number of brands here. One of them is called thinkenergy.com. I don't know where you live. Hopefully you'll buy your electricity from thinkenergy.com. It's a really great company, by the way. You should buy your electricity from there. But Think Energy, we have a product, very simple product, that when you get your bill, we also send you information to tell you what your consumption is versus your neighbor. Very simple. Every month we say, because hopefully we have your neighbors as well, so we say you are consuming 5% more than your neighbor. Guess what happens? They want to somehow to consume less than their neighbors. And they want to know. That's an amazing, they want it. And some people stay with us because they want that particular product. It's very simple to put together, but it's very powerful. And the reason I'm highlighting this to you is because people absolutely want to know, want to do, want to act today. The new generation is not like the previous generation. They have the smartphone, they know how to use it, and they want to interact with it. Everybody, as you know, everybody is now given the Nest thermostat, etc. Why? Because people also want to interact. They want to be able to control their thermostat before they come home, turn it on, turn it off, etc., etc. It is amazing. We see that firsthand. It's quite remarkable. So this concept of independence, I want everything to be tailored to me, I don't want to have exactly the same thing as my neighbor, it is truly amazing from the new generation. Finally, energy policy clearly is important, is having huge impact around the world, including in the US. But I would say, honestly, energy policies in the US are having less of an impact. Why? Because of shale gas, shale oil. Because the cost of energy has come down so much and the cost of gas so much. You don't need to have massive policies. You look at the EPA, lots of people say EPA rules had an impact on closing coal-fired generation. Maybe. But in reality, the reason why we are having 70 gigawatts of coal-fired generation that's going to shut down, it's not because of EPA rules. It is because of price of gas. When you have gas at $2, there's no way that coal can compete, no matter what. Absolutely. No matter how you cut it, it is impossible for coal to compete. And by the way, all of that coal is going to Europe, which is interesting. Energy efficiency, and renewables are having an impact as well. But in the US, we are in a very different situation where shale gas is having a huge impact, which is fantastic for the US and the competitive environment here in the US. So what I try to highlight here to you is very quickly, to leave time for discussions, is all these changes that are happening around technology, but also some changes that happened here in North America because of the shale gas, shale oil revolution as well. We should not forget about that. It's really to impact. And so what is a company like ours doing? This is a global company, big company, active in 80 countries. So before, we had a very simple strategy as well. We go around the world and we invest in big things. We invest, $500 million is the minimum investment we would make. And we build a power plant or a gas plant, etc. And we have a long-term contract for it. But now the world is changing. In Europe, for example, we've announced last year a write-down of $13 billion. Why? Because our gas plants weren't operating anymore because of all that coal that was going from North America to the US. That was one reason. The other reason is massive investment in renewable as well. So electricity prices went down. In fact, the spark spread was negative. So we weren't making any money from our gas-fired power plants, which is terrible. If you look at the Germans, E.ON, RWE, they're in a much worse position. GDF Suez as a company, in relative terms, we're doing much better than anybody else because we are more global than anybody else. But Europe, you have a number of factors. Demand is down because of GDP growth that's negative. You have renewable that has a huge impact. And then you have coal going into Europe. All of these three things had an impact on our business. So people are responding differently. If you look at the German utilities, they decided to split themselves in two, so kind of a new economy versus old economy. We decided to do something different. We said we continue to do what we are doing in emerging market because we are big in emerging market. We want to be the benchmark energy player in fast-growing market. There's still demand there, so we're still active. We are big, so we'll continue to invest business as usual. However, in terms of energy transition in mature markets, and this is Europe, the US, the UK, and Australia, we want to invest less in energy and focus more on services. So we really want to gradually to move away from big power plants and move more towards the services business and invest in distributed generation. So it's going to be very different. So less investment in mature markets and more investment in emerging markets. So that's in essence at a high level our strategy, which is quite different from that of many others, and we can discuss that. I'll stop here. Thank you for listening. I'm happy to take any question you may have.
We can sit down and. Thank you, everybody. You might have noticed that it was getting pretty warm in here. We've now turned on the air conditioner, so it'll probably get very cold, but hopefully it will be okay. Thank you very much, Zen, for such a wonderful survey of so many issues. I'm going to start off by asking one question and then open it up to to the audience, and I'll be able to fill in with some other questions if you're particularly shy today. I hope you're not. One of the things that struck me in your discussion and in some of our conversations earlier today, that ENGIE really is a North American company. And with a lot of investment in Canada, you talked about a pipeline from Texas to Mexico and other activities in Mexico. We did a task force report here at the Atlantic Council this past year about the U.S. energy boom and national security. But one of the things we determined as we were doing that task force, it's really not just the U.S. energy boom. It's a North American energy boom. And we'll be doing a lot of work over the coming year on North American integration. Maybe if you could comment a little bit on that as to how you see the importance of integrating the three countries and what effect that might have on all sorts of issues, national security, but as well as any number of other issues.
No, I agree with you. This is an excellent question. I absolutely agree with you that the three countries are integrated. And we see that. We see that in our business. We've been, for example, in Mexico for 20 years. And we've had a gas distribution business for about 20 years. And for a long time, that business was actually not doing well. By definition, because we were in competition with the propane business in Mexico. And propane was a lot cheaper than gas from a gas distribution company. And of course, shale gas changed everything. And as a result of that, one of the most profitable businesses that we have now is the gas distribution business in Mexico. Why? Because you have now, Mexico, the price of gas there is linked to Henry Hub. So prices went down back from 2008, $15 now down to almost $2. So there's been a massive, massive reduction in the cost of energy in Mexico, because it's one of the few countries in the world that's buying a lot of gas from the US today because of the connections through the pipes. And more pipes are being built. If you look at the growth in Mexico in the energy sector, a lot of it is around pipe. We are building one of the first pipes, I guess, the Los Ramones pipeline linking West Texas to Mexico City. But there are many more pipes that are being built or will be bid out and built to link the U.S. to Mexico in order for the Mexico to import more gas as opposed to less. That's one. The other thing is a lot of thinking is also we have one transmission line going from Texas to Mexico as well. A lot of people are thinking about maybe building more to reinforce the system so that you can transfer electricity between the two countries. So what is the impact of that? If you look at Mexico, I still travel a lot to Mexico. It used to be easy to go to Mexico. There was no lines. You go, especially from Houston, 2 hours, and you really, it was easier for me to go to Mexico City than to visit the business there than it is to visit our business in Boston. It's no longer the case. If you go to Mexico City, I don't know when was it when you went there, huge lines, people from all over the world now going in there because of the opportunities. If you look at the growth in Mexico, it's mind-boggling. I went to visit Guadalajara a few months ago. They built this whole new area, absolutely brand new factories, etc. And we're like 50 miles long road, and we're building a gas pipeline there. And on both sides, new factories, etc. Taking advantage of low-cost energy. But in Mexico, they take advantage of low-cost energy. They take advantage of more productive, because obviously cost of manpower is also very low indeed. So if you combine the two, Mexico is more competitive than China. So lots of businesses are going to Mexico. Some businesses, which is quite interesting, dual businesses. Some of them are in the US and some of them are for the same company. Some of them are in Mexico to take advantage of the advantages of the US and the advantages of Mexico. So I have seen much more integration in the past few years as a result of, again, gas business than ever before. So it is mind-boggling. So I agree with you. I think you have to look at it from an energy perspective, from a commercial perspective, as one block and not three different blocks.
Aha, good. We have hands. We'll ask you first, and then.
Hi, Allison Good with SNL Energy. You all have operations both in LNG exports and imports here in the United States. And so I'm wondering, do you think that the U.S. will always be reliant on LNG imports to some degree despite the large amount of exports and given what we're producing?
You're talking about import of LNG. You know, I think import of LNG could play a role in some markets. Markets, for example, that need peaking gas in the winter. You can actually import some LNG and it still makes a lot of sense compared to, for example, building a big, very expensive pipeline. Take the Northeast. It would make much more sense to import LNG because the facility is already there. To import LNG than build a pipeline that would cost you $1 billion to take gas to, let's say, Boston. So I think it still makes sense. And if you look at the overall cost, it is better to import LNG. Exporting LNG also makes a lot of sense because when you export LNG, remember you're building a new liquefaction facility. It's for the long term. You're looking at the next 25 years. You're not looking at what happens tomorrow. And when you build an LNG, you usually, in fact, most of the time, have a long-term contract with somebody who's buying your LNG. So again, these LNG facilities need significant, I'm talking about export now, export facilities need significant amount of money, so they need to have long-term contract with the buyer either in Europe or in Asia to buy your gas, and therefore it makes sense if you have a buyer on the other hand. If you don't have a buyer, then I think it'll be very difficult to finance, frankly. So nobody is going to let you finance a new LNG facility if you don't have a 20-year contract on the other end. So most of the LNG facilities that have been built make a lot of sense because they all have long-term contracts. So for the new ones to be built, if there's a need of new ones, they need to have long-term contracts, and then you can do them.
Ambassador, then you haven't talked about nuclear power. Can you give us a take on that?
You know, nuclear
And
power.
will you just, people should identify themselves.
I'm Lawrence Crew from International Energy Partnership.
You know, nuclear power may make sense in some markets if you're talking about the United States. I think in the United States it's very difficult for almost any technology to make sense other than renewable. We talked about the cost of renewable that's coming down, and gas, because gas is cheap. Because if you compare the cost, if you look at the cost of electricity from a gas-fired power plant, let's kind of summarize it. It could be $1,000 per kilowatt. Nuclear power plant could be 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So it doesn't really make sense. Does it make sense in some countries that need massive power very quickly, where they don't have cheap gas, etc.? It may, but you have to look at the cost. Right now, the cost of coming from nuclear power plant is very high. In addition to cost, there are other things, maybe reliability of supply, and some countries may look at it, and they may say it may make sense for me to build a new nuclear power plant, irrespective of the cost.
Wow, lots of hands, good.
Thank you, Georges Mihajas. I'm from a Norwegian development company interested in how to improve the efficiency for heating, air conditioning, and ventilation in both commercial and residential buildings. I understand that this part of efficiency is lower than lighting from your graphs. Our second point of interest, probably is less relevant today, is indoor environment, how to improve the efficiency or the productivity by having a better indoor environment, which was the star last 2 weeks ago at Greenbuild in Washington, D.C., with a study sponsored by United Technologies. So my first question, what are you doing, or how you foresee the evolution of efficiency for heating, air conditioning, and ventilation?
Yeah. You know, candidly, I'm really not an expert in HVAC technology. We don't make them. We don't. So I can't comment on that point. The only thing I can tell you, I live in Houston, Texas, and it's very hot, so I have an HVAC system at home. I changed it a couple of years ago, and the change was the efficiency of the new systems is quite remarkable. It is absolutely, in fact, the old one was like 12 SER, and I think you can get 20 SER today. So they're much more efficient, but how it's done, etc., I really don't know. I'm just a user of that. But HVACs are much more efficient, and maybe you should talk to people who make them, and they'll tell you about how they've done it. I have no idea.
You know, I've heard from people, Google, for example, of course, they're coming from a particular point of view, but the comment being that the future of energy is in software, not hardware. And you said a lot about that, you know, during your presentation. But you would agree with that, or?
Absolutely, I would. If you look, for example, at battery technology in particular, it has evolved, and clearly the costs have come down. But if you really look at where the innovation is, it's really about software. How do you control it in real time so that it comes on and off when there's excess electricity? Maybe for a couple of minutes, software is there to store electricity. Maybe 2 minutes later, you need to kind of export electricity from your battery. So it's really the software in real time. Right. And there's a lot of innovation. There are lots of companies in Silicon Valley working on that. I agree.
Right. Yes, and then we'll go to the second row.
Alex Fassbender with Ecovia. I got a two-part question, really. Relates to the water energy nexus. So first, about GDF Suez and NG. What happened to Infilco, and where did that wind up? Is that the water part of Suez? And then the other thing is just enjoy your comments on what you think about the water energy nexus as it relates to your business going forward.
The water energy businesses.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Suez Environnement, you're talking about that kind of globally. It's a separate company. It's a listed company. It's not 100% part of our company. It's separate, and we control less than 50% of that. So we still have an ownership in the water business. The water business is doing very well, and it will continue to do well. It's one of the most successful and largest water company in the world. Has been renamed now. It is Suez Environnement, and it'll continue doing its thing. So it's not 100% part of the group. It's not 100% owned, and we don't control it. So it is not 100% part of the group. So it used to be, but when we merged with GDF, we had to sell it down. It used to be 100%, but in 2008 we had to sell down part of our stake in Suez Environnement.
Okay, one more in the first row, then we'll go to the second. Oh God, we've got them all over the place. Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Matty Macarin, also from the International Energy Partnership. Well, thank you so much, sir. I'm also from France, so very well know what GDF, Suez, and Engie are. We listened to Energy Secretary Ernie Moniz speak a couple of weeks ago, and he said that the carbon capture and sequestration processes, both for gas plants and for electricity power plants, are in place, and that if companies invest and develop those processes, we are going to have a total carbon capture for both gas and electricity. So I was wondering, is Engie going to invest and develop these processes?
I think we are involved in some projects in Europe. Do these projects make sense? I guess it may make sense in some regions where they have a lot of coal, cheap coal, and that would make sense. However, as a company, we have decided not to do any more coal-fired projects around the world. We made that decision, we announced it to the world, and so we will not be involved in coal-fired generation moving forward because of our involvement in COP21, because of what we're doing, etc. So we won't do that. Does it make sense for some countries? It may do. It may absolutely do. If a country has access to very expensive gas and very cheap coal, CO2 sequestration might make sense.
Okay, we'll go to this side and then go to the second row. So we'll go to the first row here. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. Jean-François Autain. Well, thank you, Zine, for a very great presentation. Really a seismic change in the energy landscape, and it's like, the old dinosaurs have to fight for survival here. But my question is, you say we are changing the model in developed economies, going more towards distribution. We are not changing the model in emerging markets. Why that? Why would not it happen in emerging markets? What happened, for example, in the telecommunications business, where they actually jumped over the fixed lines and went directly into the smartphone and so on?
Jean-François, that's really a fantastic question, and we wrestle with it because a lot of people told us that, and we thought about it. If you look at the telecom business, where I agree emerging markets in Africa and Asia, they jumped completely to mobile technology. Could it happen here? I think it could, but maybe a little bit longer term. The reason being is that today in emerging markets, there is a need. The growth is still high, even at 5%. There is a need for electricity today. And today, you can meet that need in a very efficient way through building big power plants that meet the needs of hundreds of thousands of customers overnight. Whereas the solar PV, etc., will cost a little bit more money. You have to invest if you're a consumer in an emerging market and you don't have a lot of money. Still quite a lot of money to buy this solar PV. And the financing tools, etc., aren't available yet. Could it happen faster? It is possible, but our view is that it will happen, absolutely no doubt about it. It will take longer. And therefore, there's still an opportunity for us to continue with our business model. That doesn't mean that we will continue with our business model and exclude investment in distributed generation. Absolutely not. We are also looking at renewable in emerging markets. We would participate in distributed generation if the opportunity is there. But what we are saying is that it makes much more sense to continue this investment. Whereas in mature markets, today the environment is ripe, certainly in Europe, where the people are moving straight to distributed generation. They want to do it, they have the resources to do it, etc. And the economic growth isn't there. Demand is actually going down. So if demand is going down, by definition, you don't need any more electricity. So it's substitution effect. So that's why. But timing, I agree. I mean, you could have this discussion 10 years from now and you say, hey, I was right because, look at how China or Brazil has moved faster there, and you may well be right. I don't know. But it's like everything else. You have to have a vision of where your company should be going to and move forward towards that vision, but be prepared to change if the market conditions change, and if they do, we will change.
Yeah, I would guess in a place like Africa, you could have distributed generation in a lot of small villages, which may not be commercially viable for a company like yours to get involved in 1,000 different small villages, whereas there's still energy poverty in large population areas, which will require more traditional types of generation, at least in the short term or midterm. Ariel?
Sir, excellent presentation. Ariel Cohen with the Atlantic Council. Excellent presentation, and I'm particularly interested in GDF Suez's outlook for the LNG market, and particularly vis-a-vis Russia. We have sanctions on Russia. A big Russian market in Turkey now is under a cloud because of the security concerns. The costs of production in the Arctic Russia are high. Stockman is not going anywhere. What is the future of the Russian gas? And if you distinguish between the Gazprom piped part and the LNG part in the north, and of course the French involvement there of another company, can you give us your sense, please?
I'm always tempted to give answers to questions. But on this one, honestly, I don't know. And if I give you my answer, it could be a stupid answer or or somebody else is better qualified, maybe here, maybe Ambassador, you're better qualified to answer this. It involves geopolitics. I don't feel I'm qualified to answer that particular question. So maybe the Ambassador can have a perspective.
Maybe Ariel, you're the person who can best give the answer to your own question.
They taught us in law school never to ask a question that you don't know the answer.
Well, then maybe you should give us the answer, because I really, I don't think I'm qualified to give you that kind of, okay.
Yes.
Terry Hill with the Passive House Institute. Recently here at Greenbuild, they put up a direct current microgrid, and it worked well, and they were able to work off the mains and off the direct current, and it was a microgrid, so that was another thing. But my real question is, are you looking, if you're getting into distributed generation, are you looking at retrofitting existing buildings as a market?
Absolutely we are. Absolutely we are. We have a company I didn't mention maybe in Europe, very successful with 80,000 people. It's called Cofeli. That's what they do. They go into buildings, they retrofit, they change light bulbs, they do everything. They manage the building. And we've been very successful. It's the largest in Europe, actually, with 80,000 people, very profitable. And we want, in fact, to bring that business model to the US. And so that's what we are trying to do here. If you look at next year, as our strategy start evolving, this is the direction we're going to go to, which is more towards managing building, towards services, absolutely.
Okay, we'll go to the second row over here. There were some hands that had been up. Yes.
Jerry Stellan
You're
with
in the
Soul
third
Systems.
row, not the second row.
I'm sorry.
All right, and do your question, then we'll come back to the second row.
Jerry Stellan with Soul Systems. We're involved with solar distributed gen, and our experience in the U.S. market, though, it's a tough market to tackle with respect to distributed gen to build scale. We see a lot of large utilities starting to jump into space, a lot of large banks starting to jump into space. I'd like to understand your strategy. I heard a little bit of residential. Are you looking at commercial, industrial? And typically the investors in this space need to be tax efficient unless you're a very early stage development type of company. So strategy with respect to tackling distributed gen in the United States.
Yeah. I agree with you. The U.S. is very competitive. But, we've been here in the United States for over 20 years now. And our business is about competitive markets. Today we build big power plants and we compete. We are not a regulated entity. We are not a utility in the U.S. We're a competitive player. And we've done actually very well as a competitive player in competitive markets of Texas and the Northeast. Now our business model is changing, and we are aware that we are going to a slightly different market, and it's going to be competitive. There are lots of existing players. However, I think we have an advantage. The advantage that we have is we are learning from different markets around the world. Being global, we learn from everywhere, and we learn almost every single day. So we believe we have that competitive advantage that we can bring to the U.S. that many maybe US-only companies may not have. But time will tell, I guess. We can have this conversation in a few years, and I can tell you whether we've been successful or not.
Okay, back to the second row. the young woman over here.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jenny Mandel with Energy Wire. You spoke about the gas import-export business and the sort of long-term outlook of those kinds of investments, but then also about trends in energy generally that push towards more transparency and information available to consumers. What kind of changes do you see happening in gas markets, global gas markets over time, and what kind of timescale do you see those changes happening in?
I think global gas markets, everybody is talking because of the massive amount of LNG that is being produced, I guess, around the world, not just in the US, not just coming from the US, from Australia. I think it's another big market. Middle East, Qatar is not going to give up on their #1 position. So everybody is looking at exporting gas, and a lot of players, they look, as you know, the cost of, or the price of LNG is linked to the price of oil today. It's not that transparent, but it's linked to because oil prices came down, price of LNG has come down as well. So, so that's having an impact on many countries. But everybody, because of the amount of LNG export that will come, especially from the US over the next few years, people think that there will be more transparency of LNG markets. Some people argue there could be one LNG price around the world, a little bit like oil. Some others would argue that it won't be the case. Maybe there will be more, like 2 or 3 prices, even a Pacific Rim price and an Atlantic Basin price. Time will tell, but I think I am personally more in favor of the second camp that says there could be 2 or 3 prices and therefore more transparency of LNG prices in the future. Could we move to one single price around the world? Doubtful, really doubtful. Not in the short to medium term. Maybe long term, I don't know.
Let me follow up on, I guess, a related question. Every time I talk to European energy leaders, they keep saying, oh, we need American LNG, we need American LNG, we need American LNG. The question being, at present prices, and given Russia as an example, who will compete probably as much as necessary to keep their gas business, how confident are you that LNG exporters are going to be able to compete in a European market? And then there's the question from a policy standpoint, well, even if the LNG doesn't get to Europe, at least it keeps the Russians honest as far as their pricing. So do you, is it just a question, well, we'll see what happens, or how do you see that?
I think my answer would be, we'll see what happens. Yeah. I'll tell you why. Because a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on today's prices. They look at the price of oil and they say, oh my God, oil prices are going to remain this low forever. And LNG is linked to the price of oil, and therefore, by definition, LNG prices are going to be low forever. I have this beautiful graph that shows Henry Hub going back 20 years compared to prices in Japan, I guess, and then prices in Europe of gas. You know what? They cross over the years. So it is quite remarkable. For a long time, for a number of years, we had the strongest prices being in Japan, and now strongest price is actually Europe. So it has changed. So the only thing I can say about prices is that whatever they are today, they're going to be different in the future. So in terms of export, will export be able to compete? I think export can compete if there are willing buyers who are able to sign a long-term contract. I don't believe that LNG, at least in the short to medium term, you can have merchant LNG. The investments are just too big, too huge. So you need to have a willing buyer on the other end to be able to build your LNG facilities. So the LNG facilities that we have in the United States today, most of them have a long-term contract. So they would be doing well. And I really believe that in the future, because by definition, no single company can build an LNG facility on spec, no matter how big you are, etc. You want to have a contract on the other end. Whatever you're doing in the LNG sector is long-term. You're building something, you have to have a view on supply and demand, a view on prices for the next 25 years. Price today, I would almost say it's honestly irrelevant to that kind of decision.
Yeah. Although, you know, one of the, and I won't hog the floor any longer, but I think there will be an issue over the long term as to how long long-term contracts can actually last. And from the standpoint that even the Russians that have long-term contracts are reducing prices in order to compete. And so it's a complicated
I agree.
issue.
It's a very complicated business. It is a long-term business, and players who are in the LNG business tend to be long-term players, big players. And that's really where that business needs to be, because it's a very different business. It is not a merchant business. And what happens in the short term, I would even define what happens in the next 5 years, has almost no impact on the overall business. It's a long-term business, and you have to plan for it long-term.
Any others in the second row? All right, let's go to the second row over here.
Hello, my name is Alexander. I'm also from France. the largest shareholder in your company is the French state, and you spoke early on about how the benefits of shale gas in the United States and other parts of the world. Have you been able to either have a conversation, you or your company, with the French state regarding liberalizing the shale gas market in France? Because thus far they've put a complete ban on exploration. So have you had that conversation? Thank you.
I don't know. That's a simple answer.
Okay. Moving third row over here. Here, wait for the microphone. The microphone? Yeah.
Could you comment on the LGN facility being built in Calvert County now, and whether they have long-term contracts for that facility?
I don't know.
You don't know?
Yeah,
okay.
Sorry.
A very big facility is being built there. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on this side? Okay, let's go to the back row.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Kipkoskei Toroitich. You could say Kip. I'm from the Kenya Embassy in Washington, D.C. I'd like to know the...
Can you please bring that a little bit closer?
Hello, is it clear now?
Yes, thank you.
I'm saying my name is Kip from the Kenya Embassy in Washington, D.C. I'd like to know the aspirations that you have in the East Africa region vis-a-vis the energy aspirations of the governments of EAC.
Yeah, very good question. We have big aspirations for Africa. We really do. In fact, we've changed a little bit our organization. We used to have one region which was Middle East Africa. We split it in two. We have now a region focused on the Middle East and people focused on Africa. Right now we have a number of projects in North Africa and in South Africa, but not in kind of in the middle. We're moving in a big way there. We believe in the growth that's happening in Africa. We've announced a number of initiatives. Plus, you could argue that France traditionally has been very close to Africa because of, past relations. So Africa is core to our new strategy, and we are moving there very fast. So we're looking at Kenya, and we're looking at many other countries, absolutely.
On this side. Let me, before we have a couple more minutes, maybe others will raise their hands. How would you describe the differences between the United States and Europe with respect to energy markets and the future energy transition?
I think the difference is that, in my opinion, energy transition will happen faster in Europe than in the United States. That's my view, personal view. It's not the company view, actually. Why am I saying that? I think the biggest difference is that in the US, we have shale gas and therefore low-cost gas versus Europe that still has expensive gas. That's the main reason behind it. So if you look at technology here, that's one. The other thing is in the US, you have one market which is 1,000 gigawatt market. It's huge, really big. So being able to take that market and replace it overnight with distributed generation is difficult to do. Whereas in Europe, the markets are obviously single market per country, and given the cost of gas, etc., then I think they can do it faster. The other reason is that efficiency, because, well, not efficiency, but because of demand growth. Here we still have demand that's growing, so you need more power. You could argue that most of the new power could be met by distributed generation. In Europe, you have decrease in demand, so there is less need for power. So actually you don't even need to invest, because gradually power plants will be shut down because there is less need for them. And because of efficiency, they're moving faster to, with new policies, etc., compared to the US. All of that is pushing towards distributed generation, whereas in the US, with cheap and plentiful gas, it has time. So gas will be kind of, in the US, it will be a bridge towards towards distributed generation. Whereas I think in Europe, if you have that bridge with gas, it's going to be a very short bridge. And you have to get faster to the other side. That's my assessment. And maybe people here would disagree with that. I don't know. I know there are a number of Europeans here, so that's a personal view. It's very difficult for, I don't think, our company doesn't have a view on one or the other. We're going to be there and we're going to meet as a company, we're going to meet the needs of each country, whatever that need is. But because of your question, that's kind of a personal view. It may be wrong. I have no idea. Time will tell.
Thanks. Could I get one more question? What about direct current microgrids? Do you see any role for direct current?
I think there's a role for everything. I really don't know. I haven't heard a lot about it, and how much of an impact it will have. But I tell you, innovation is happening everywhere, and it is quite remarkable. I mean, I've been in this business for over 30 years, and I would qualify energy transition as a big revolution that's hitting the energy sector and hitting it in very fast and in a big way. And the impact will be huge, and it's coming from everywhere.
You know, I decided that maybe we shouldn't ignore your question, Ariel, on Russia and Turkey. So if you repeat the question, I'll give you my response anyway, and then if there are no other questions, we'll adjourn.
So my question was, thank you, Ambassador. My question was that in view of the abandoned American gas, clear effort by Qatar to keep its market share because of Iran coming online one way or another, and it will take a long time, granted. What is the outlook for the expensive Russian LNG, and in view of where the Russian new fields are versus West Siberia, further in the Arctic, or in the case of supply to China, in East Siberia, lacking infrastructure? What is the perspective, what is the outlook for the piped Russian gas and for the LNG?
Well, now that I fully understand what the question was, maybe I'll say I don't know too. No, you wrote the report. No, a couple of things on that, because I think the Russia things are so salient right now, generally with respect to Russia. And I thought you were asking about Turkey, but I guess I didn't understand the full question. My response to your question as just posed is not good. I mean, given where pricing is now on LNG, and given the costs of infrastructure and the pressure on those costs, not also to forget that there are still sanctions on the Russians. I don't see them being very active in the LNG market very quickly. The Russia, in a big way anyway, you may disagree with that, I don't know. But I do think the Russia-Turkey issue is very interesting right now. And questions have come up as to, well, what's going to happen with respect to Russian gas that is exported to Turkey? What will happen with respect to Turkish Stream, which is already delayed? What will happen with respect to nuclear plants that Russia is scheduled to construct in Turkey? And for what it's worth, and I don't know any more than anybody else, my take on it is that Russia is not doing things at this point which are totally contrary to their interests. If they cut off gas to Turkey, or canceled nuclear projects, or abandoned Turkish Stream, which might happen anyway, that is cutting off their nose to spite their face. And it may be that Turkey might take some actions, although they're very dependent on Russian gas. So I misunderstood earlier what you were getting at, but anyway, so I'll close with that comment. Anybody, last chance for any, okay, now we have 2 more questions. We have 7 more minutes, if that's okay.
My name is Arman, Embassy of Kazakhstan. I would like to know your opinion. how do you think TPP and transatlantic trade and investment agreement, will they affect the gas prices and energy landscape in general?
I couldn't quite hear it. What was the question? I'm a little deaf.
I would like to know
age.
your opinion, how TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, as well as Transatlantic Trade and Investment Agreement will affect energy landscape and gas prices.
Oh, TTIP and TPP? Well, it's going to have, it could have some effect in that if passed, that there would be no restrictions at all on any kind of gas exports to free trading countries. So it would it'll make it easier for licensing. I don't know. You would be better to answer this part of it. I don't know that it would really have a major effect on, from a commercial standpoint, on what the costs would be. It would make it more accessible, but maybe not less expensive. Is how I guess I would. Yeah. Do you agree with that, or who knows? Another. All right. Okay.
Innovation, research, development. First question, is it more in the research activities are taking place more in Europe or in North America? And second, how the new fund announced by Bill Gates and others might affect activities?
You know, because we're a European company, a lot of the research that we do in-house is in Europe. We really don't have any research facilities here in North America. However, what we do is we do work with smaller companies here in the US because there's a lot of innovation here. We also take small stakes in new startups. In fact, we have a fund that we started especially for that, to take small stakes in companies that are involved in energy innovation and that have something unique. And we've done a lot of investment all over the world, by the way, in the US, in Europe, in Latin America, and we're looking at other parts of the world whenever there is innovation. We are willing to invest a little bit of money because we believe that in energy transition is real, and therefore we have to be part of it. And so, yeah.
Okay, no further questions. Let's thank Zin Smati for a fantastic presentation.